Hello, everyone. I'm Shahina, and thank you so much for inviting me to do this talk here and for joining us today. So I describe myself as an artist, an adventurer, a theory tester, and a TEDx speaker. And today, what I thought I would do would be to actually show you my paintings live. So if there's any questions or any feedback while I'm showing the paintings, and please do interject. It should be as interactive as possible. So I'm just I picked out a few of my pieces to sort of just illustrate my practice to you and some of the things I'm inspired by and some of the influences that I find out in the world or from different artists. So this is a piece that I did for an open call for the United Nations, and what it's really meant to do is demonstrate the importance of peace and unity and coming together. Now, one of the little quirks about my works, which is not just in this piece but throughout, is that I liked the viewers to be able to sort of have their interpretation. So they generally work whichever way up. And that's something you'll find that's a little commonality in my work. So this was where I wanted to start off with and show you how I use different mediums. My work is also very mixed media. I use acrylics, I use inks, I'm also an urban artist, I would call myself. So I do a little bit of street art as well. And I like to have all of those influences in my work. One of the other things I also do is I think that art should be a very inclusive thing. I think art should be about breaking down barriers and allowing as many people to engage in dialogue or engage in art as possible. So when I first started my practice, probably a good 5-6 years ago, when I transitioned from marketing to becoming a full-time artist, one of the things that I really wanted to do was explore vision beyond vision. So I started exploring with the surface, and what I did was I made sure that the surface is as tactile as possible. So here's another piece that I created quite recently, and what you will notice is that not only is it visually kind of striking, it's equally striking by touch. So one of the first pieces of work I did around this was recognized by the Braille Society, because actually you should be able to explore most of my artwork through also touching it. So here you can see that the surface is raised, and I've tried to make some markings just as striking as what you could see. So if you were visually impaired or if you had issues with your sight, you should be able to navigate the painting just by touching it. Again, this sort of works whichever way up you have it. So I do a bit of a 360 so you could see that. And this was a piece that I was inspired by Escher. So Escher is one of my favorites. I really love him. And I love the way he challenges the viewer. So the way he makes markings so that you're not quite sure how to navigate the painting. And then there's like a square within a square. So this was like a window to me, within a window, within a window. And that was something that was influenced by my love for Escher. So that's one of the techniques that is kind of common within my work, that you will be able to explore the multi-surface nature of what I do. And here again is another piece that sort of does the similar thing, that if you come in close, or actually I come in close, you'll see that the surface is really raised. And one way of knowing that is by sound as well. So if you can hear that, it makes a sound to let you know it's a bumpy surface. And then after I sort of managed to do lots of work of this nature, I decided to do something quite quirky. And I learned to paint by sound. So that's where you have a coarse surface, just like this, and you use a pen. And I kept my eyes closed just to really understand what it was like to be sight impaired. And all of my research was really helpful because just before lockdown, we started a project with St. Martin's and Blind Aid, and myself and another artist were artists in residence, and we worked with sight impaired people using art as a way of bringing people together. And it was just absolutely a really incredible experience working with people with sight difficulties, because in fact it kind of just makes you realize that there's so much creativity just in the mind's eye. And that's, you know, some of the people were actually blind, and that was what they were using to be creative. So I also do sort of workshops, and last year during lockdown, when we couldn't actually go out and celebrate birthdays, I decided, was it last year, the year before, 2020? I decided to do, as my birthday is on the 1st of May, which is International Workers' Day and Labour Day. So I decided to make it a celebration of the artist. And I did a workshop called Redefining Black. So with the artists amongst us, we know that black is a color that you could actually make through a series of using different colors to make that tonality. So I did this piece here. And my question is, can you tell which one's the processed black? So if anyone wants to shout, you just say stop, or I'll just tell you anyway. All right, I'm going to give you a minute to have a little look, and then you can kind of guess.
I'm not sure what you mean by processed black, Shahina.
So by processed black, I mean the black that comes straight out of the tube. It's not one I've made. All
Right.
these blacks I've actually made into black, but
Yeah.
one comes straight out the tube.
Uh-huh.
Have you got an idea, Helen?
I'm wondering if it's the one, the far right, the very black.
This one, this one, this one? Just say stop and maybe I might point to it. Well, for all you curious ones in there, it is actually this one.
Ah.
Kind of know, you might be able to know that it looks a little bit flatter than the others. So that's a takeout as well for the artists amongst us, that if you actually make your own black by using primary colors, you get so many different shades of black. So that was something I do. Now, another interactive question for all of you out there. I mean, I'm an abstract artist, but I did start off as a printmaker. So I kind of bring in lots of different elements of things I've studied in the past. And here is a mixed technique that I've used, but it's actually a portrait of someone. So any guesses? You can shout.
Boris?
Pardon?
Boris?
Boris? No. But a good guess. How about if I tell you that's his nose? All right, I'll tell you. It's Elvis. That's his nose. That's his eyes. And that's his microphone there. If I tell you he's Elvis, can you see him?
Yes, I can see it now.
Great. So this is another sort of commonality within all my work, is that beneath the surface is always something that's a little bit cheeky or hidden. There's two. This is actually a diptych. So there you've got. I was trying to sort of illustrate mass culture and the things that are hidden under the surface. So that's another piece. This one is one of my favorites, I have to say. It's one I'm kind of proud of, and it's called the Nude. So anyone would like to hazard a guess as why it's called the Nude?
Is it the stripped down colours?
Yes,
Yeah, I was going to say.
yes, exactly. So well guessed. It's made of 54 different shades of skin. So what I really wanted to do was show diversity. So I'm also a racial justice campaigner, and it's an important part of what I do. And often I use art as a medium to explore making strong statements. So there's 54 shades of skin, and I live fairly close to London Bridge, and there I've from memory. And I mean, one of the things I think I will always remember is the bus route 78 when I sit at the top and I can see Tower Bridge, and it just always makes me feel really lucky. So I've done that from memory. But this piece is always the one that when it gets exhibited, a lot of people talk about. And they described it in so many different ways. So one of the things that's pivotal about my artwork is that I'm really inspired by a saying by Degas, who says art isn't what you see, it's what you make others see. And I've been fortunate to have that dialogue around this piece of work. So there's people been saying that they can see Japanese houses, another bunch that said that they could see boats, another one saying a acropolis, all kinds of things come out. So maybe I could ask you all the same. I mean, now I've given you the answer, but I'm sure with your creative eyes, you can see a number of things. Kimbal, what do you see?
I see a tree in the sort of the dark bit, sort of on closest to you. There's sort of a tree coming up out of the ground,
This
and
bit?
then and then above that, then there's a sort of font in a garden, like a sort of to the right of it. There's this sort of like a font or a weather. No, I don't know what that's called. And then above it, there's a horse with a
See a horse.
or a goat. Yeah, right at the top.
About here.
That bit, yeah, I see a horse there, just by your index finger there, with that sort of black thingy there. I see a horse's head there.
Oh, amazing. Oh, I think now you've mentioned it, I could just kind of see it now. But I've never heard anyone see a horse. So you must have some special way of seeing. And that's the beauty of my work. You know, much like no two people see color the same way. I try to bring that element in that maybe no two people see the painting the same way. Thanks, Kimbal. So that's another piece that is a bit different to some of the other things you've just seen. As I mentioned, I am a racial justice campaigner, and that's one of the things that's really important to me. And I try to bring those things that are important to me out in my work in a variety of different ways. So sometimes they're really subtle, like how they were in the Nude, or sometimes they're really overt. And this is a piece that I really wanted to include in this talk because it's the run-up to International Women's Day. And this piece is dedicated to women everywhere, because no matter what culture we come from, no matter how different we are, there's something that brings all women together. And I was trying to show that in this painting, because it's about a question. Do you think the faces are all the same woman or a different woman?
I think they're
I think they're all different.
They're
Yeah,
all
different.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because lots of people come back with their answer that it's a different woman, but in fact it is the same woman. So what I was trying to do, okay, and yeah, sure. What I was trying to do here was show how how a woman, she has so many different sorts of facets. the same face, but always a little bit different. And that's really, you know, if I think about all the important women in my life, especially my mother, you know, she has so many, same beautiful face, obviously, but so many different facets of it. So that was in dedication to International Women's Day. And that was my Lady Muse there. And then another one for International Women's Day again. And it's kind of showing, well, I don't know. Let's ask you, because I have my own message here, but I'd be really intrigued to see what message other people take away. So, Helen, what message do you think this painting's giving?
Not sure. It looks as though there are cogs, sort of something about thinking or working things out, or time, problem solving, workings of the mind. Not sure. I think the person hasn't got a lot of distinct features, so it could be sort of any woman, every woman. The colours a bit something to do with nature or the world.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Helen. You just basically said everything I was probably going to say anyway. So I'm glad it was interpreted in that way. Anybody else got anything else to add or would like to share their interpretation with us? Or do I just pick at random?
I think it's quite interesting how the background sort of is almost like the main feature of the painting. It's almost though, you know, normally the figure would be the subject, but it sort of feels that the subject is almost like erased, like as if they're not there. They're like a silhouette, whereas the background is like really strong, and I don't know, that feels as though there's a message there, perhaps.
Yes, thanks, Kimbal. Yeah, it's exactly kind of that I really love your interpretation, because she's there, but she's not there. You know, her presence is known, but is it really as overt as it could be? And very much following your point, like really mixing it up consciously, I kind of put her in darker colors, but a little bit more in a subtle kind of position. She's not in the foreground. And very much to what Helen said, they're cogs. So really, you know, it's a matter of time, you know, before she becomes the shining star of her own story, really. So it's a narrative within a narrative, I like to think. And then also the cogs are representative of something working. So her mind is always working. And again, she could be any woman, because that's how I see women. And then her, like if you look here, she's got like armor. There's a chest armor in front of her, and that's all around her heart. So, you know, different way of depicting women. So that's another one. I'm not sure how I'm doing for time here. So this is another. So one of the things I've been always critiqued with is that my work it is no, you know, I'm not Picasso in blue. You know, they just every now and then I get a little fascination, and I think that's one of the things I love about art, is that it just lets you explore your little fascinations. And me, thankfully, I have enough to last a lifetime. So I also explore working on different surfaces and light. So I don't know if you can kind of see, but can you see the light that comes in? So yes, I sort of explored adding light to it. And this was one of the props for I also work digitally. So I do sort of videos, I do movement, I do digital art, I do all these random things. And I got this idea because I loved the surface and making it translucent. And then I beamed in these little lights. and then when you sort of actually edit them and put motion behind it, it's just a really nice experience. And I found that when you watch it, it's actually really calming. So that's my little light exploration, and that's where the exploration of light started for me. But anyone who knows me will tell you I don't do anything by half. So that ignited something in me. And then I continued to sort of explore light. So here's one of my pieces. Can anyone see anything in particular? I'll bring a little bit closer to see before I crash everything around me. Oh, that's not going to happen, is it? I'm just going to have to do that. So I'll give you a few seconds to just really have a look. And if anyone can see anything beneath the surface.
Is that a
No.
face? Yeah.
Yes,
Is
there's
a
a face
face
in the top left.
here?
Yes.
Yes, very well observed. So if I do this, if this doesn't crash in front of me. Can you see the face?
Mm.
Yeah, it's Buddha. So he lights up. Actually, I've designed a thing where you could actually plug him in and he lights up.
Hmm.
And then when he's illuminated, Buddha springs up there. So I think that's what's the time?
2027.
So that's really, I could be here forever and just keep on going, but I think it's only fair to give it Kimbal enough time. So that's me in a nutshell. You could also find, if you're interested in finding out more about me, I do have a website. And if anyone's interested in, I know we're all artists in here. I love to collaborate with different artists, and I'm delighted that I've got outside of my London bubble to meet all of you fantastic people. So I think I've got 1 minute for one question. And if not, then thank you so much for having me.
That was a great presentation. Thank you. Don't worry about the time. We're not precious with time here. But please, like, if anybody wants to put questions in the chat, if their audio's not working as well.
I have just it's not really a question. It's more of an observation. I was thinking of the painting you did of Elvis, like the kind of the abstract one. Like when you first showed it, I honestly could not see anything other than just shapes and colors. And then when you said it was a face, I looked really hard to sort of try to find the face, and I could sort of gradually see the face, and then it sort of started to emerge, and it suddenly became really, really prevalent. But it was only when you sort of really consciously said, yeah, that's Elvis, there's the face. And then what I noticed is that as soon as I'd seen that, I could not unsee it. It was impossible to not see that anymore. And from that point on, it was completely figurative. It was a completely figurative painting and not abstract anymore. And I wonder how you do that. Like, I mean, it seems like you don't want to tell people what it is. Like, you kind of want them to figure it out for yourself. Like, I don't know, how does that sit with you about that idea of not, yeah, once you see it, you can't unsee it.
That's such
Can
a
you?
good,
I don't know. Maybe you can. Maybe you can go back to the original again.
well, in that particular piece, it is thanks, Kimbal, because it is a great observation, and I've heard that because this was exhibited, Elvis was exhibited recently, and I heard the same feedback that he's kind of hard to find, but then once you see him, that's all you can see. I think in that particular piece, because it's a little cheeky, all about finding Elvis. So it's fine that once you see him, you can't go back and he's the only thing you can see. And I found that that's kind of throughout my paintings. So I haven't really taken you through the complicated ones where there's loads of hidden imagery, but I have worked out that you can actually undo what you first see. So I hide. I openly hide little messages in my work, but I'm not going to be the one to tell you it's there, because I really believe that we have the ability to see things differently. And if I tell you that is there, then maybe that's not actually what you're meant to see. You're meant to see your own version, but I've now told you this is what it is. And I think in figurative art, that's brilliant. But in abstract, there's that mystery is part of the allure. So I do it a little bit purposefully. But in my other work, you'll see one thing. And then once you see that one thing, the rest of the painting opens up to you. So you can almost replace Elvis, because you'll see something else within the vicinity. But with the Elvis one, it's really true. You see him once and that's all you see. Cool. Anyone else for any more?
I just like the idea of letting the viewer make their own mind up about what it is that you're presenting.
Yes. Okay. I think it's really great, because before I started sort of exploring this, I was a printmaker. So I was really like tied to the idea of making sure that each of my work was representative. And it's really funny, because this also gives me a way of, I'm kind of like sciencey minded as well. So I love neuroscience, and this allows me to sort of explore how people see. And the more relaxed you are, the more you'll see in my paintings. So I'm still exploring them myself. So shall if there isn't any more questions, I'm happy to hand over to Kimbal, Alice.
Sorry, I had a question actually about
Sure.
your process. And I was wondering whether you use, it looks like you use stencils quite a bit, but whether you use any other particular processes to add, the figurative elements that you play with.
Yes, so the work I've kind of showed you today seems very much around the stencil stuff, but that was really to do with International Women's Day. Most of my work isn't really stencils. So what I do is, I forgot to say, I'm actually a weather artist. So I work with an astrophysicist for about a year to study the weather. And now a lot of my work is influenced by the weather. So I'm able to capture the rain, the wind, in some place, sometimes even snowflake. So that's one of my key influences. And there you wouldn't see any sort of stenciling. The other influence on my work is to do with my culture. So my grandparents are from West India. East, West India, and their color is sort of celebrated every day with a technique called it's like a practice really called rangoli, and that's using rice flour and paint. And really traditionally you would put a marking on your front door, and then the wind takes it away, and that's meant to give you blessings. So I employ that technique a lot in my work. So firstly, I don't really use an easel. I prefer to be a bit like Jackson Pollock and do my work just on the floor, because I find that I can see better. Then I don't really use a brush neither. So I apply the paint directly to the surface. And then finally, I use water as a conductor. So I make free movement through the use of water. And I have created a technique I called a reverse Jackson Pollock. So I found Jackson was a little bit directive, a bit too prescriptive with the brush, like the paintwork and how he made that. So I do exactly the reverse. I'm very gentle with the paint, and I allow it to work with me. So I don't know. I don't have one. Oh, actually, I do. knew that was going to happen. This one. So this shows you really what my other work looks like. And it's, again, works 360 and then really demonstrates how I normally work with the paint. So I hope that answers your question, Nicola.
Thank you.
Great.
Brilliant. Thanks so much. Yeah, if there's any further questions or comments, feel free to pop them in the chat. And it'd be great to pass over to Kimbal.
Okay, so my name's Kimbal, and I'm an artist with quite a broad practice, from ranging from painting all the way through to performance art and participatory map making, video. I was doing some installation work before at some point. And the part of my practice that's really taken off, I guess, or taken the sort of biggest direction is painting. And I want to talk a bit about my paintings, but I mostly want to talk actually about the process behind it, or not the process behind making the paintings, although I will get to that, but more the ideas behind it and the practice in general. So I mean, this painting is an example of one that I made recently. Well, not that recently actually. That's not true. It's quite a few from a few years ago. But it's representative of some of the work that I make. Very colourful, sort of blocky shapes, and very sort of densely layered. Lots of shapes kind of intertwining. But the really I'll come back to my painting, but I wanted to. Oh, actually, how do I? Hang on a minute. I thought that I would go. I need to click the screen. That's how it works. Okay, so so one of the really kind of key aspects behind my artwork in general is the idea of landscapes, and I see my paintings as landscapes, but not landscapes that really exist. They're more landscapes that are imagined. I sort of see them as worlds that I'm going into, and that I create actually through the process of making the painting. And so I've always been interested in landscapes. I've never actually done a landscape painting, but I'm really interested in the notion of a landscape, in the sense that landscapes contain many layers, and they also have lots of layers and lots of stories and lots of lines that run through them, lots of shapes. This is a photograph I took some years ago in Edinburgh, from the top of Arthur's Seat, looking down, and it's a picture that sort of has stayed with me for quite a long time because of what I feel that it represents. Because in this painting, in this photo, there's this path going through the middle of it, but there's also lots of smaller tracks, some of which are, I don't know, rivers, and some of which are created by foot, and others which are sort of natural formations. And I'm just really interested in this idea that landscapes have aspects that are partly engineered by nature, the river formations, and also some that are created by humans. So lines travel through, they go across landscape, but they can be physical, such as a path that goes through, or they can also be such as a path or a trace. You scratch a piece of wood and a trace gets left behind. But they can also be imaginary, in the sense that they can, the path that you follow is something that exists in your mind. You imagine the route that you're traveling along. Or a borderline, for instance, another thing that exists in the imagination. So so where I'm going with this, I'm interested in the idea that there are physical traces in the landscape, but there are also stories. You know, you've been to this place, you remember being there, and there are these layers, different layers. This is lines which are created. It's not my photograph; it's one that I found online, but lines which are created through a process that was uncontrolled in a way, sort of spontaneous process. But we don't know exactly what created these lines. What created these lines? They emerge somehow through the process of being drawn. In this case, it's a skateboard. I think it's from a skate hall, and these are marks which are left behind, traces which tell the story of something that was there before. This is another image that sort of really inspires me. This idea of traces of something that was left behind from a previous time, so a demolished building, and you can see the layers of previous usage of this building. The walls have been knocked down, but there are traces of a past that once was. So these are things that really inspire me, and this is one of my older paintings, and it's very interesting to hear Shahina talk about her process before, because the idea of not being fully in control or allowing the painting to sort of emerge out of a process is something I really relate to as well. With my earlier work, this is a piece which is from about 10 years ago or even longer, I was interested in how the materials themselves would create the painting. So this is a piece made with varnish and bitumen, and I was really not thinking about creating a composition, but more sort of working with these materials and seeing what they would naturally do when I put them in contrast with each other. So this piece is, I think, 1.20 meters wide, and it's on canvas, and the black is bitumen, and the color, the sort of orange color, is just varnish. And so I did quite a few paintings in this style. Oh, I can flick between them. That's excellent. This is another one which is with varnish and graphite, and two different types of varnish, which I put onto the canvas, and I allowed them to do their thing. So in that sense, I very much relate to some of the things that Shahina was just saying before. And the painting very much emerges out of a process, which is sort of unexpected process or unplanned happenings. So that's kind of where I started with painting. That idea of the painting emerges out of a process. It sort of appears. The materials do their thing, and I create somehow a balance between the chaos that's happening in the painting and me trying to control them. And sometimes I could never control them, and they did their own thing. Like this one, for instance, you can see there's this wrinkling texture, which I always hated. I thought that there was something that was, for me, I thought it was a failing in the painting because I wanted it to dry flat. And then, it kept on happening, and I realized that it's just because I was putting really thick layers of varnish on. But then I actually, realized that it became a thing that I really liked. So a sort of happy accident led to, learning something, but then also it became something that I now think of as beautiful. But yeah, so just to backtrack, or to kind of rewind, so I'll come back to painting, but I want to talk about where all this kind of stuff comes from. So I worked in 2014, around about that time. just it was before that actually, 2012. I started doing a project where I travelled by hitchhiking around Europe and also later in the United States. And I was interested in this idea of traveling along a line, but a line that sort of exists in, as a line that I'm creating, drawing a line through space. And in this case, this was the route that I followed. Oh, there's a number of routes that I followed around Europe, and you can kind of imagine where these places are. There's London, and the rest of it. You can sort of try to figure out where these places are going through. But I've deliberately left all the national borders off. But I was interested in what would happen along the way. This is actually in the States, this picture. But I was interested in what would happen along the way. What stories would I find along this line? What did that line that I've created on the map, or created the map, what would that represent in reality? And so I filmed the places where I hitchhiked from, so gas stations, roadsides, and I wrote down the stories of the people that I met along the way, and I made a video with all these video clips. So there's this static video clips of looking at the road ahead, waiting for a lift, and then that video clip I then created a montage with the video clips and narrated the stories that people told me along the way. So it's very much a narrative of the lines that I travelled along, the transit routes, the stories from the transit routes. And this is a map that I saw a couple of years ago. It's a Japanese map from the Edo period, so 300 years ago, I think. And what really interested me about this map is it's a map of a road, the Tokaido Highway, which is from Tokyo to somewhere in Kyoto, I think. And it's the map is made in many different pieces, and it's many different slides, and each one has a section of the road of this journey, and it sort of dictates what you would find along the way. It's a line, and it's almost like a narrative of a journey or a road map, but just the single road. So not the entire map, but the just what you'd find along the way, and you got all these details of people crossing the river, and and I thought this is a really interesting idea of documenting a journey through a place, but through a single line. And so mark making is a really big part of what I do, and how marks can be made in an involuntary way. So like the skateboarding photo that I showed at the beginning, the marks on the wall, smudges that were created as a byproduct of skateboarding. In this case, it's a drawing that was made by myself and somebody else who I was blindfolded, and somebody was moving my arm, and I was drawing with the other hand and sort of tracking the movement of my hand, my arm through space, and also my hand. So capturing the gestures of the movement of the hand, and sort of interpreting that with marks. So I'm really interested in this idea of how marks can capture something has happened, a trace of an experience. This is a performance piece that I did, which involved making a journey on foot to the place where this event was taking place. So this was all kind of pre-organized. So the people who were there at this at the performance space had my phone number, and they to be honest, I can't remember how I did it now with the phone. Either I phoned them or they phoned, or maybe I had their phone numbers already in my phone, and I phoned each one of them as I was walking. to this place, and they were all blindfolded, and there was a big sheet of paper, and they were drawing. And I would tell them the description about what was happening. I described my route. You know, there is a large tree with 3 branches. There is a doorway with a diagonal line. I was trying to describe the things that I could see in very sort of structural ways. And the person so I'd tell that to the person on the phone, and the person on the phone would then tell that to the other people who would draw it. And so there's an incredibly complex and convoluted process to make a drawing, which, you know, ended up becoming a bunch of scribbles. And so I use this kind of idea quite a lot, that the idea of like adding an element of not being in control in order to engineer something that happens, and often that thing that happens is, you know, leads to often a lot of scribbles, and sometimes very beautiful, sometimes not, but it's never really the point. The product is never really the point. It's more about the process of doing something, and drawing being the thing that connects people. Touch also, again, another similar thing to Shahina of the sensory paintings. The idea of drawing from touch, responding to what you can feel. This is a piece I've done in various situations, drawing faces, drawing what you can feel, and mapping that onto paper. You know, what a hard surface becomes a hard mark, or a soft mark becomes a soft mark, but also more about the exploration. You know, using the process of drawing as I want to say excuse, but I don't mean that exactly, but more the idea of using that as a reason for having an exploration, for exploring. Drawing becomes the reason for exploring. That's an example of one of the drawings from that. So it's very confusing when you're touching and drawing at the same time, because sometimes you're not sure whether you're drawing, you know, the sensation of an ear, or whether you're drawing the sensation of your nose being touched. And yeah, it's very, very disorienting, very interesting experience. This was the result of a performance at a performance art festival, and I was inside a cupboard, and people would come in one by one to have a touch portrait made, which ended up becoming very big on a very big scale. So here the drawing is on a small scale. It's like A3 size, but this is A1 or even bigger. So instead of, you know, doing small marks, small gestures to interpret the sensation of the face, this was sort of using big sweeping gestures. So it becomes even more abstract and quite dense. And this idea of, and I've often thought that these pieces look like maps. I've always been interested in maps and mapping and that idea of, you know, landscapes, traces. And so I thought about how I could use this technique to create maps, like actual maps of real places, rather than you know, just scribbles based on portraits. So I developed a series of workshops which are about using touch to draw maps of places which are personally significant. So it's an exercise you do in pairs, and one person imagines a place or remembers a place that they've been before, and they draw that through touch on the other person's hand. And then the person who has their hand being touched then maps what they feel onto the piece of paper. So again, another sort of process of disconnection, and you know, you're not. It doesn't then become an actual drawing of, you know, if you did this yourself and closed your eyes and drew a map of a place that was personally significant to you, it would probably end up looking fairly much like that place, even though, you know, you don't have that much control because you've got your eyes closed, but you know, you are still the person drawing. Whereas with this, the person who's drawing almost becomes a sort of like bad computer that doesn't really respond very accurately to your input, but you know their hand becomes like a touch sensitive surface, and they respond to that touch in their own way, and interesting marks come out of it. And then we did all sorts of fun stuff, like going on a derive around the city, and using the drawings that were made as a map, and interpreting that map in relation to reality. So trying to find where is the yellow splodge, and walking around the streets and sort of finding out where that might be, sort of interpreting the lines as if they were the roads, or rearranging you know, the city to fit the map. Yeah, it's I could say a lot about this, but I want to move on to some other. There's so, and then I also worked with sound, or I do work with sound actually, and thinking about how you can interpret the sensory experience of sound with drawing and marks in the same way that touch was done, but then, you know, with differently. Again, with eyes closed, this is much easier. Sort of thinking about lines and gestures. I turned that into a project that I invited people to get involved by making a drawing of sound in their own environment. So closing your eyes and listening to the sounds, and making an interpretation of that. And so people sent me drawings, which I then collaged together and created this sort of imaginary sound map. This is just a section of it. It's much bigger. It's digital, and it's a zoomable map. It's on my website. You can sort of actually zoom into the details like this, so you can see up close how I've collaged people's drawings together. So I see this as a form of participatory mapping, and creating an imagined landscape, and it's so much fun, such a pleasure to work with other people's materials, because, you know, there's these amazing drawings that, you know, I didn't make them, but, you know, I had the privilege to be able to use them as collage material, yeah, I had a lot of fun doing this. And another important aspect of that project was the sound. So they also sent me sound recordings, which I then used to create a soundscape, which I actually performed as a live piece. So this is a screenshot from a video where I showed a video which zoomed its way through the map, so you can see a bit of a detail of the sort of orange and these triangles here. That's actually a section from the map drawing collage thing. And it sort of went on a journey. The video took a journey around it, and I played the sounds and sort of edited them and messed around with them in Ableton to create a soundscape live. And then so that sort of brings me back to my paintings, which are very much influenced by the more sort of theoretical work that I do about mark making and about maps and about places, and I do see them as landscapes or imagined landscapes, but at the same time I also don't see them as I don't see them theoretically, and I see the whole aspect of painting as a way of escaping from the ideas in a way. It's a very intuitive process. It's very much about playing with materials and playing with color and just getting lost. So for me, this is almost, you know, it's a way of letting go and having a conversation with myself, or having a conversation with the materials, and really, you know, getting into layers. And yeah, and then the painting actually then ends up becoming a trace of my conversation, or of that dialogue that I've had with the materials. There's another detail shot of one of them. I've been working with sort of unusual shapes, thinking about how I can play with composition. And often what happens is, you know, things end up fitting together by by chance. Like this smaller blue piece fitted very nicely with with the lines. You know, the lines join. They often join even without meaning to. Maybe there's some kind of innate thing about composition that often, however I arrange the pieces, there's something that would, you know, join to another one. I don't know if you can see the mouse cursor, so I'm waving it around. Yeah, and this is another painting, which the materials I use are oil paint with varnish. So I use the varnish as a medium, so that's where you get this sort of translucent color, or the translucent light sort of shining through. And then I build it up in lots and lots of layers, and I work with squeegees and other sort of things to scratch into the surface, allowing it to dry, and then sort of layering on with other materials that, you know, sometimes I put acrylic on top of varnish so that it sort of cracks open and you get interesting effects. And that's another one. But I see, you know, as again, I feel like all I'm doing here is constantly referring back to Shahina's presentation. But like I really relate also to that idea of, you know, just allowing other people to see what they want to see in it. You know, for me, I never really see anything in them. For me, it's just about arrangement of shapes and composition and putting things together and playing with the materials. But then often people see things in them, and then I can't unsee them. Then I see things in my paintings, you know, in retrospect that I you know, hadn't seen whilst doing them, and then suddenly I can't unsee them. But also I keep on seeing new things. You know, sometimes I look at my paintings and then things appear that I've never noticed before. Like, you know, different arrangement of shapes, or a color that pops out, or I don't know. So, but it's open, you know, it is open. I know how it is for me. I know that which way up it goes. I know it has to be this way up. And sometimes people turn them, you know, the other way up, and then I get like, oh, I don't know, that's not right. But then actually, then often I realize that, you know, you can see things in different ways. Oh, that's it. That's the end. So yeah, I'll open up to questions.
Thank you so much. I think what you said about those two paintings that you had together about this accidental alignment, I think, like, maybe that was paraphrasing, which really resonates with the way that your two practices have accidentally aligned to me. You know, that kind of, there's so many interesting crossovers, even though you have got those very kind of distinct, diverse practices. There are some really fascinating links.
Yeah, it's interesting you said that, because I've really struggled with this whole idea of separating and combining practices for a long time, and I mean, even, you know, on my website I have it arranged by two different tabs. You can go in two different directions. One is project and the other one is paintings, and I've sort of like tried to necessitate this idea of them being distinct practices, and they are, but they're also really, really, you know, they're really overlapping, and there is many crossovers, and they all kind of inform each other, and it's really taken me quite a long time to get to terms with the fact that actually everything is part of the same practice, and, you know, I don't, you know, that it is the same practice with just different outcomes, and actually, in a way, painting is just another one of my projects. It's not just like coming out of nowhere. It's but I really struggled with that for a really long time.
Do you think you'll change your website? Do you think it'll become more?
I am actually. I'm actually in the process of, I'm planning to redo my work, because it's just a big mess at the moment. But I'd like to bring them. I'd like to get rid of this you know, distinct classification, and rather just like have. I mean, there'll probably still be a tab that says painting, because I think, yeah, they do have different audiences in a way. But I think that it's important that it's not, that it's kept that it is acknowledged that it's all part of the same practice. Yeah. Somebody was about to say something and I cut them off.
Yeah, it was me. I just
Yeah.
wanted to say thank you for your presentation. And I also was taken back by all our sort of unspoken synergies, which
Yeah.
I did
Yeah, that's
really well
interesting.
to pair us up, because we do. I mean, we've done a fair few similar things, and I wanted to ask you around the idea of you exploring sensory, and also you also, not only yourself but also your participants, you sort of blindfolded them. Where did that inspiration come from?
It's a good question. So when I was I did a fine art degree first, and I at Leeds University, and then I went on to do performance art masters at Queen Mary in London. And whilst I was there, I got really into performance art, particularly intimate performance art. I was really interested in exploring intimacy. Like in a lot of my performances were very intimate, and they were also, they tended to sort of sit on very sort of personal, intimate, sort of borderline, sort of sensual, not quite sexual, but kind of on this sort of direction. And I think that was something that I was really, it was a side of myself that I was really exploring at that time. And I think that the touch, I was also doing contact improvisation, and a lot of stuff that was to do with sort of physical contact, and that idea about sensory exploration, I guess, and relating to others in a through touch, and I think it came out of that. But I to be honest, I really don't know how it all came together. But it was, I think I was also interested, I remember at the time, of this idea that portraits, or like looking, is you tend to be quite judgmental when you look. You make lots of assumptions about a face when you see it. In the sense, you see a face and you already have like all these different judgments like that just appear. But if you don't have those, if you take out the visual and you just have touch, you still have judgments. There's all sorts of judgments to do with like the way that a face would, the way that somebody would respond to being touched, and there's a whole different set of dynamics there. But it's not necessarily the same ones that you might have if you see someone. So I was interested in that idea as well. The idea that vision is like the most dangerous of the senses because it's so full of judgment in a way. At least that's the kind of ideas that I was thinking about at the time. So yeah, the touch portraits were kind of, they were portraits of people, but they could be anyone. You didn't, sort of portraits without judgment. Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you, because we make first impressions within 7 seconds, so we are highly reliant on what we see. And yes, when you do those team building exercises as well, you have to look at the person and draw without looking at what you draw. So that's quite interesting. And do you think that removing judgment has influenced your practice? Because there's like, even I really love, I have to say, those quirky shapes are really lovely. And I also saw a couple of figuratives in your work. So
yeah.
Do you think really exploring judgment has influenced your work or influenced your approach to work?
Do you think? Sorry, I missed. Do you think that what influenced my approach?
So going through that process where you've sort of taken away seeing when drawing, do you think and your ultimate goal of eliminating judgment. Do you think
Mm.
that really, after you did that project, does it influence your practice?
Totally. Yeah, totally. Like on so many levels. Particularly the idea of thinking about not being fully in control of the making process. You know, the idea that to some extent the artwork emerges from the process, and you don't always know where it's going. You know, there's like an element of, there's always this element of chance in a way, but it's not completely chance. It's not. It doesn't come out of nowhere, because it's all going on in your head. You know, you're the master of everything actually, but there is sort of, you know, trying to create something that you're almost like creating the framework or the system in order for the chaos to happen. And I think, you know, judgment. Yeah, we judge all the time, particularly with, like, I find when I'm working on a painting, when I'm sort of thinking about where to put shapes, or where to draw a line, or where to, you know, what to. I spend hours just looking at the painting, trying to figure out what the next step is. Sometimes, you know, I'll be at the studio and I'll spend a whole day of just like looking at, like, just trying to figure out, and then I go home, I take a photo of it, and I plan on my phone. You know, I draw on the phone. You know how you can, like, on the photo you can draw on it, and I'm like, oh yeah, it needs a red thing, so I put the red thing on the picture, and then I go in the next day and I'm like, okay, I know what it is. I'm going to put the red thing there. And then I put the red thing, and it's a disaster. It looks horrible, and so then I then allow, I then end up doing something completely different, and then, you know, it either works or it doesn't work. But I think, I don't know, for me it's very much about like trying to get into the zone in which the chance or the spontaneous intuitive stuff can happen. It's almost like trying to create the environment for those things to happen, and to do them without thinking about them too much. Because often I find the best paintings are the ones that just happen. You know, you just do it, and it's, whereas, you know, other ones you spend like days or months working on something and redoing it because you want that perfect mark, and that's the judgmental thing. It's like, you know, it's like in your head you're like, yeah, but I need that red thing, I need that red splodge. But then in the end, you know, you end up with silver, and you're like, okay, I wasn't making silver, but that's kind of cool. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally relate to you. That you might, I mean, there's been plenty of occasions where 98% of the canvas is spot on, totally perfect, but there's just that one little corner, or there's one little thing that no one else actually sees, but as an artist, you're like, that bit, and the amount of times I've probably just scrubbed it all off, probably had the most perfect painting anyway for that little bit. And then that's been my challenge also, to get over, you know, being able to accept it, you know, in that is pretty good. And maybe sometimes what I do now is I just do as you do. I take the time to sort of walk away, and then I have to go back and see in a few days, is that still a problem? If it really is, then I'm willing to start over, but sometimes I find it's not. So sometimes it's my own frame of mind. And also what you said about, you know, people often ask me the same sort of thing. Did I plan this? Did I want it there? I think as artists, I'm very much like you. My focus is the color, the shape, the composition sometimes. And over and above that, what comes out is all quite natural. But I think your work is really beautiful. I love those
Thank you.
translucent.
Likewise.
Thanks. Translucent effects are really powerful.
Do you find, because one of the things I find with the process of painting is I find that I have to get to the point in which I hate it. You know, I have to get to the point in which I don't care anymore about the painting, and I don't care where it's going. And in order to not feel precious about it anymore. You know, I almost feel like I have to get to the point in which the painting sort of, it's gone completely out of control. You know, I've had those perfect, you know, as you said, the 90% is perfect, but there's the one bit that's not perfect. You try to fix the bit that's not perfect, and then you know, you kind of, you go into it, and then in the process you've ruined everything. You've made a complete disaster of it. But then you
apparently it's not for her, because she wasn't a little upset. She sounded like she was
through
Not quite
somebody
sure what happened there.
what was I talking about?
You've got to sort of hate the painting.
Yeah. And you have to go to the point, and then you don't care about it anymore. And it's at that point, it's a bit make or break, because you could just end up ruining it completely. But there is this sort of moment that you kind of you don't, yeah, you've got over the preciousness, and then you allow for this almost scary time where it's like being brave. I don't know. Do you have that moment as well, where you sort of you've gone over the bad. You know, it's got bad. You kind of got nothing to lose, but you give it 100%, and then something comes out of it. I find it often works like that for me.
I think I have had paintings like that, but for me, I find that if I go back to how I'm feeling myself, and I always know that the elements of how I'm feeling going to pour out onto that canvas. So I've had some fantastic angry ones, you know, when you're just like figuratively drawing and then you throw your paintbrush out, and they're quite nice. They're quite nice in themselves. I've had ones where I will be just like you said, I'm so precious about every marking, every bit, and then I get fed up, and then I want to scrap it all and just see what happens. But I think my way of now doing it is, if I'm happy with the overall feel, I will probably I now put space and pause, which I never used to do before. And I find space and pause really gives me a completely, so I might be going one direction with it one week and it's looking great, and then suddenly I've paused. And also I think our process is very similar. We wait, don't we? We have to be quite patient with the layering and stopping and letting it dry and then pour over. So I think our process is quite similar. And then what I now do is, like, I go back to things really, like, I've got one piece and I've gone back to it after a year and a half. So yes, I've been there where I've been like really precious, and then just a complete polarizing, I don't care. But I find I could probably tell you, just looking at my paintings, which ones I've been in which kind of mode. I mean, do you find that as well? Do you remember like how you were feeling when you were making each painting or not?
No, I don't actually. That's often a problem. I'd like to say that I do, and I'd like to sort of be able to say, you know, I'd like to actually be able to know what I've done in a painting. Also, I'd like to be able to sort of, you know, try to recreate it or something. But the reality is I don't. I really don't know. And I mean, sometimes there are some paintings that I've made that I do remember how I felt, but only if I, you know, happen to be feeling a particular way for a while. You know, there's a painting that I did when I was feeling really rubbish. You know, I was feeling really rubbish for quite a while, so I know that painting. I know I really struggled with that painting, and it's a disaster actually, that painting. But I really don't know. Most of the time, I don't remember. I really don't know where the process, you know, what has happened in the meantime, in order to get to the end result, which sometimes, you know, becomes quite complex, because there was once I was asked to do a commission. I was asked for a commission for a painting which was a remake of a painting that I'd already done, which was kind of a bizarre request in a way, but there was the person who wanted the painting had bought it together, but they broke up, and as part of the divorce settlement, one of them got the painting and the other one didn't, and they wanted a remake of the painting. So I told them that this wasn't actually going to be possible because I don't work in that way, because I work very intuitively, but I'll try to make something as close as possible to the original. And actually in the end it did sort of look kind of like the original, but in a very different way. Some of the same colors, and I tried with that painting. I looked at pictures because I didn't have the original obviously anymore, but I looked at pictures and tried to sort of deconstruct how I would have done it. Sometimes I take progress shots along the way to sort of just track the progress, but it's kind of pointless because when I then try to recreate it, if I try to sort of do the same gesture on one step, it's never going to be the same, because if I would try, then I would be controlling, stopping the spontaneity of it, so it really has to come from that sort of spontaneous place. I did at some point. I did one where every time I stopped, then I took a photo and I made like a slide. What's it called? Like an animation that you can see step by step the progress of the painting, which is quite fun. But normally I just go straight through. Don't think. I think there's some questions.
Have you seen the chat? Is that what you're looking at? I was
Yeah.
just going to send some few questions in chat.
Yeah, I'm just having a look now. Have you seen Ruth Phone's work on Instagram? No, I have not. That sounds. I will have a look.
That was directed to Shahina, actually.
Oh.
I should have put that.
It sounds interesting. I'd like to have a look as well. What sense of scale is this? I'm not sure what that was relating to, but all of my paintings tend to be about. There are a variety of sizes. Like some are about 1 meter. The square ones are 1 meter by 1 meter, and there's some smaller ones and some larger ones. But I like 1 meter as a size. It's good for gestures. And in the photograph there are lines on roads and lines of communication, telegraph wires. Did these come into your mark making process? Yeah, that's really interesting. Also, all different kinds of lines that exist, lines of communication, storylines. There are so many different kinds of lines, and it's really interesting to think about through. Think about how the whole idea of lines has so many different meanings, and often I do think about those things. When drawing, when making a line, you're almost like as you're drawing, your physical point of contact with the paper. It's almost like you're creating a journey as you go along, and I often think about the the Renaissance map makers, who did the sort of journey, the maps of going around with the ships, going around the Horn of Africa and sort of drawing the coastline as they go around, or at least that's kind of how I'm imagining it in a very romantic sense. Creating the map as they go along. Their physical position in the sea with their boat is them drawing the map with the pencil. That's how I imagine making a drawing. You are journeying around the paper with the point of connection with the paper, and that's very similar to this idea of telegraph wires, communication. I like that. Claude Heath's blind drawings. No, I don't know that either. That sounds great. I'm going to look this up.
Hi, I put that question up. He does something. I'll put my video on as well now.
Yeah.
He does something very similar where he's blindfolded and he draws. It's all very internal to him and his way of seeing, rather than participatory in the way that you were working. So he does quite a lot of work, feeling his own hands, his own face, plants, and then he makes them into large scale drawings. So they're quite interesting. And
cool.
Some of them, you know, I'm sure will look familiar to you in the style and the way that he works. It just,
great.
just sort of
Thank you. Oh, look that up. That sounds great. Thank you. Does anybody have a last question? Otherwise, maybe we wrap up.
I like the idea of the use of bitumen and varnish, and it's not something that I've ever used before. How do you go about doing it? What do you put down first, the bitumen, or
to be honest, I really don't recommend it. Yeah, no, the problem is that I was really excited about bitumen because I went to see that installation at the Saatchi Gallery many years ago. Richard Wilson, the one with, I think it's called 2050 or 5040 or something like that, and it's like a room full of oil, crude oil, and it's all reflective. You walk in and you walk into this sort of passageway, and there's oil on a surface, and the whole room is reflected into the oil. It's like a perfect mirror, and I was really fascinated by that piece, and I thought of, you know, it's completely reflective, but the material itself is really deep, thick, black, and I loved it as a material. But then, and I thought it would be really interesting to make paintings with it, and I tried all sorts of stuff like car oil, and I like was trying to use like mud and all sorts of stuff, but I realized that none of these materials actually stick. You know, none of them actually stay on the canvas. And then I discovered bitumen paint, which is basically what you use for waterproofing roofs and sheds. But the problem with it is that it never actually dries. It never fully dries. So even to this day, I actually ended up cutting one of my old paintings to pieces because it was, it was a disaster painting, and I decided, you know, finally to cut it up in pieces, and I've kept a piece of it, but not any of the bitumen bits. And the funny thing about it, or not really funny, but after cutting it, I made that painting in 2009, I think, and I cut it last year, and the paint was still wet inside. It dries on the surface, but then inside it was still wet, and it was, you know, my hands became black from cutting it. So it's really,
I might give that a miss.
Yeah, it's really unstable. The Victorians used to use it in their paintings, and you can actually see, you know, if you look at some old paintings in the National Portrait Gallery, the black they used was bitumen, and it cracks really badly, and you know, over time it just disintegrates. I kind of fixed it a bit because I covered the surface of it with quite a few layers of varnish, so it's almost like hermetically sealed in a way. But then if that gets scratched, then it goes in. I mean, it's fun to play with because it's a really nice black. But then what's really nice is sort of just mixing materials that don't really mix very well with each other. So, you know, you can kind of get similar effects with just using varnish. So use varnish and well, no, it's not really the same. The bitumen was really nice. It has this really nice color. You know, that's what I liked about it. It's almost like, you know, it's like treacle. It's got a kind of treacle, and when you mix it with the varnish, it's sort of like disintegrates into it, and yeah, I don't know. It's worth a try. I mean, have a go. I don't recommend it, but you know, it's fun. It's really fun to play with. But it first of all, it takes months before it actually gets touch dry, and then
the canvas looked beautiful though. You know what you showed, you'd photographed it. It looked really lovely. The colours, the black and the gold, orangey gold colours, fabulous. It reminded me of the universe, really. You know, outer space type thing.
Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, no, I know what you mean about that. That's kind of, yeah, that's kind of what I think when I look at them also, you know, that you're just looking into another world and you get lost and you time travel, you know, go on a journey in a spaceship.
Thank you.
But the people who have these paint, I mean, there's a few of, I don't think I have any of those earlier ones left myself, but the people who have them, I believe that they, you know, they are still fine, actually. They haven't changed that much. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see what they look like in 30 years' time, because I really have no idea. I really don't know. It will be interesting to see. But I mean, that's a whole interesting thing about, you know, decay of paintings and or decay of anything, how they change over time. The colourful ones don't seem to change that much, which is good.
It's very interesting, and like capturing those the images in documentation, like digital documentation as well, is like that becomes an instant archive, doesn't it? But thank you so much for both of you sharing your fantastic. It's been really insightful and inspiring, really good. And the next Art Lab's going to be on Monday the 4th of April. I think it's usually the first Monday of the month. So yeah, Monday the 4th of April. 8 p.m. Speakers to be announced, and I will post this recording on YouTube and share it as well when I've done like minimal editing and stuff. So yeah, thanks again for your fantastic presentations, and thanks for everybody coming tonight. Hope you can make a future one. Yeah, thanks.
Great. Thank you for listening, everyone. Really, and thanks, Alice. I really appreciate having the platform to talk.
Very welcome.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Have a good evening. Ciao.